Welcome, welcome, welcome. Keep connecting. We're going live in the top of the hour. Just in a few minutes, we will start. We just started a bit early so that everyone can join, so we don't have to go before, start late. Keep connecting. Keep connecting. The top of the hour, we start. In 3 minutes. Keep connecting. Thank you for joining again. Thank you for joining. Yes, keep connecting. Keep connecting. We're starting in 2 minutes now. Just thought I should start a bit early so that everyone can come in before so that we don't have to start a bit late. We start exactly at 7. No delay. So in 2 minutes, we'll be on. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining. As I said, in exactly 2 minutes, we'll be on. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining. Yeah, just in about a minute, we'll be going on. No need to start late. So I started a bit early so that when we start on time. One minute. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thanks for joining. Thanks for joining. One minute. Just in 1 minute. Starting. In 1 minute we'll be starting. Okay. There we go. So thank you all for making it this evening again. My name is Mbappe, and we are back this week with a very interesting topic related to generational wealth creation. And thank everyone who has joined. Thank everyone who has been watching through the series. It's been very, very edifying for us. I'll start off this evening just by introducing our topic. The topic we have today is heritage, your heritage, as a dimension of generational wealth. It's very important for us to consider what our heritage is and how we can package and preserve our heritage so that it can be transferred from one generation to the next. It's an important component of our existence, an important component of our past. And for me, this has been a journey of discovery. I've had to find out quite a lot of things that I did not know before I embarked on this journey. In fact, in a lot of African countries, I'll start off with this. In a lot of African countries, there is uh, uh, the people actually say that in succession can only be handed down to male children. And when we grew up as young men, that's what we knew. But a few years ago, I got to listen to the leader of our tribe explaining the fact that succession is not only reserved for the male child, that even the female child within our tribe can inherit, which was very, very fascinating for me. And there's a whole lot of rules that are tied, rules, traditions, and customs that are tied to that process. And, and apparently it's been handed down from generations to generations. And as it is today, it is very possible in my tribe for a female to inherit their father or to be a successor of their father and take over the, the, the administratorship of their father's uh, uh, wealth. So I have started off with that story because the main thing that we are going to focus today on is about your heritage and what it is and how does that tie in to the broader context of generational wealth. We're starting off with this note. So I think the bottom line here is that we have to be aware that if a family is not connected, there is a major grounding that starts eroding in the family as time goes on. If you, I've been thinking about it, and through the day today, it got me really into the thought of how many people were taken out of this continent. Some of them forcefully during the time of, of slave trade 400, 500 years ago, and then those who deliberately or consciously decided to leave the continent and move out of the continent, either to educate themselves and ended up working in the diaspora, in the West, in the East, in the South, and and all these people moved from Africa into the rest of the world. Make no mistake, the world is actually a global village right now, but there are a number of these people who have left the continent, a number of us who left the continent, and we have had children, and these children have had children, and they have no knowledge of where they come from. They have no knowledge of any other member of their family but for their immediate parents and those they know who are around them in the countries where they live. Some of them have not even had the chance to go into the countries where their parents come from to get to understand and know where their parents come from. Who was who is their father's mother, who is their mother's mother, who is their father's father, who is their father's mother. For some, the parents may have even died, and very, very little conversation is had about them. And the effects of that are very, very powerful in that children end up growing without really knowing who they are. And they have to cling to an existence, which is an existence which is superficial. It's an existence which is just what they see around them, the cultures they see around them, the traditions they see around them, and that becomes their adopted culture. And in that adoption of culture and traditions and all of that, at some point, they are found wanting. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who lives in London, and he was sharing this story with me about his children, how his children really, at some point, he thinks they've lost exactly the essence of who being an African is, or being a human being, an African child in the world of today is. And they 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 almost think that because they live in a Western country, because their friends are from Britain, from Western countries, their peers are from Western countries. They also were born there, and they just assimilate that. But as time goes on, the essence of their own existence, the essence of their own being, disappears. It starts dissipating as time goes on, and they literally become lost. And the, the, the effects of this is seen with with Black American or African Americans today. There's a big movement now in the African American community where everyone you speak to, every African American, all they will tell you is that they want to go back to the motherland. But the biggest challenge is that where do they go to? We are going to have a few exercises, which is something that has come up over the last few years, and it started helping people to connect themselves back to their roots, connect them to a knowledge of exactly who they are, which gives them essence of their present being. So the first thing the first way in which we can start that process is literally to start from where you are. Yeah? It's starting from where you are. When I say starting from where you are, I mean that you have to look at yourself as an individual. And you look at the oldest member of your family that you can remember who had died. Okay? And then you start tracing from that oldest member of your family to the oldest member of your family who is still alive. And because those are now key connectors to who really you are. Yeah. As you cast your eye back to these members of your family, you want to, you will get to engage with the relatives of yours who are still alive. You could actually be, from a family where, the father is no longer alive, the mother is no longer alive, but there should be an uncle, an older uncle who knows something about your father. There should be an older aunt who knows something about your mother. An aunt, an uncle, a relative, someone who would have grown up with your father and mother. For those whose parents are still alive, mother or father, you can start with them if they are the oldest member of the family that are still alive. And you get to interrogate them and engage with them. The insights that you get from this conversation will be very, very fascinating. The beauty about engaging on a journey like this at this time and age is that there's a lot of technology as well that you can benefit from. We have mobile phones, you can record, you can take pictures, that we're going to get into all those elements of illustrative tools that you can use in building this heritage component, which would be very necessary and properly packaged and transferable. Yeah. So that engagement that you have with the oldest member of your family living would now help you to start tracing and connecting the dots going backwards. The question that you will need to be asking them is, who was your father? Where did they live? Who was your father's father? Who was your father's mother? Who do you know anything about their own parents? What did they do? Where did they live? And try and trace and track. And in doing that, you get to get the essence of their existence, the kind of work they did. Were they farmers? Were they peasants? Were they, you know, it's amazing to find out that when you start tracing like that, maybe what you are doing now is what your great grandparents actually did in their own way at that time. And you don't even know that you have a connection to that DNA, which has given you the skill and the abilities that you have today and that you are using for your own existence on planet Earth. Yeah. So that connection is extremely important when you start from where you are. Basically, casting your eye backwards and looking at the oldest member of your family and all of that. Yeah. It's actually something that you can actually build it in a table. Yeah. You can build it in a table, what we call an ancestral table. You could have one column where you have, you know, all the oldest members of your family, traceable members of your family that the oldest living member of your family can remember. Yeah, and then you also create a list of uh, give given possibly those people would have died by now. Yeah, and then you also have a column where you capture the the names and details of the members of your family that you knew or that you have known through your life, who have also been present or who are either still alive or dead. And then the oldest members of the family who are still alive. Yeah? And you use that as a base to start building what we would look at, later in this video. And start building what we call a heritage journal. Yeah. So the essence for this is that you are able to map and trace every single aspect of your being, which you never really knew about. Things about your family, some that may be very sensitive that you never really knew about. And quite frankly, it's important that when you go embark on this journey, be ready for anything. There are things you would hear that may not be appealing to you, but it's also better that you capture the raw emotions and you keep those raw emotions, because that is what becomes the treasure of the family that you can now move from one generation to the next. Some of which may not actually be things you want to transfer, that's fine. But you build the journal in a way that the generations to come will be able to trace themselves. They will be able to know exactly uh, uh, where where they fit in the broader scheme of things in the world. Yeah. The next important component after you've built your, the ancestral table, just capturing the names and mapping it out, and create 3 columns for it. Oldest members of the family that you never really knew, who are probably dead. Oldest members of the family, all the members of the family that you knew, but who may be present, some may still be alive. And then the oldest members of the family who are alive. So those that you know, so those that you don't know, those that you know, and those that you knew who are no longer here, and then those who are still alive. You create 3 columns and you capture the names. Yeah. And then from there, we move on to building and capturing the information related to these family members who are alive and those who are not alive. When you get to capture the information from each of the people that you end up having a conversation with, each of the people that you end up interviewing, I suggest that you keep the raw emotions. Keep the raw emotions as you capture them. Whether you are writing it down, by pen, or you are capturing it with your phone, or you are doing an audio call and recording it, just go all out. There are a lot of tools that are free. We have them all in our hands right now that you can use to capture that information. Yeah. The stories about your family lines that you chase should not be alterated, because that is what actually gives the value to that information. So every information that you capture, you cannot alter it. If you captured, if it was a letter that was sent, if it was a picture that was sent, there's no need for you to try and cut it out. There's no need for you to try and rewrite. If the person wrote with what do you call this thing? Uh, uh, um, the stylus. I can't remember what they call it. But if a person wrote on a piece of paper, freehand writing, there's no need for you to go and try and alter it. Just capture that information as it is, as raw and uh, as possible. Any additional documents and information, it could be, land certificates, title deeds, and all of that. Capture them. Could be pictures, could be illustrations. Capture all of that and package it and keep putting them all together. As we get to the heritage journal, you will see. I will show you examples of how, the tools that you could also use. Yeah. When you discuss every sensitive material that you are going to capture in preparation for your heritage journal, try not to be defensive, and also try not to be offensive, in the sense that you capture this information. You're capturing this information, one, for yourself. At least you get to know exactly your roots, the information that exists in your family. It's fascinating. They always say that as Africans, we lived under an oral tradition, and the effects of that oral tradition is that this customs, this information is eroded over time. And we have not really had the opportunity to sit down with some of the elderly people in our communities and capture the information that they have and get the information that they have and put it in written material that will be visible for others to read and to know what happened. Yeah. When when you capture all of this information, just try to keep it as factual as possible. Not making it anything of, not bringing in any complexities and trying to alterate them and all of that. The next very important element, which is actually the core of what we are talking about today, is how you pull together your heritage journal. Because at the end of the day, for that information to be transferable, it has to be captured in a format that can be transferred. For that information to become family wealth, it has to be captured in a way that it can be transferred. Yeah. So, with your heritage journal, this is what will be very valuable. Yeah. On your heritage journal, as I said, you try not to be defensive or offensive of the information that you get. There are some important things that you would want to add in your heritage journal. One of the components is you want to find out about how they acquired the properties where they live. I was in all of these reflections, I've had to have this conversation. Thank God my dad is still alive and kicking and doing very well. I thank God for that. I've had to to engage with him on this conversation to find out where we live in my village today, where we have a home in my village today. I wondered how we found ourselves there. And in that area, all my father's brothers, I would say a majority of my father's brothers also live in that area. So it almost forms like a whole neighborhood where it's only my family that lives in that neighborhood in the village. And I had to ask my father how that came to be. How, because the property at that time must have been owned by the king, and the king would have, decided who gets what piece or how did it work. And he explained to me how people acquired property at that time, and how his parents acquired property at that time, and how their parents transferred the property, to the male children of the family, but not discounting the female members of the family, because a lot of their sisters went off and got married and all of that. Yeah, but they still had some claim to the land because one of his sisters ended up, working the land, and that was where her own living. She made her own living from working the land. So you need to find out now about property. How, we would be talking about property rights today, but how did they acquire the property? Was it when they got to the place? Was it a big bush? Was it a forest? Did they need to dig to create passageways or roads? How did they, what were they using for? Did they have to dig wells to get water? Were there streams around there that they use for water? And we know that water is life. When you live in an area, first thing is water, and then light, or light and water, Both are actually complementary, because in this day and age, it's very difficult to live without light or water. Yeah, and then what did the other important element that you need to capture is what they did for a living. Were they hunters? Were they warriors? Were they I was speaking to one of my friends who grew up in a coastal area, and he got to find out that some of his family members were pirates. They used to go up, they built boats and took it up into the, into the sea, and they were pirates, and they attacked ships for a living, and they would go for weeks, months, and then come back with bounty. The other very important element that we have to consider is whether they live in a period where they had very friendly neighbors. Did they end up with wars, local wars, or international wars? I actually remember that one of my, or not one, two or three of my father's brothers, older brothers, had been, taken into the army, and they went and fought alongside the British Army uh, uh, in the Second World War. And they fought alongside the British Army, and luckily all of them came back, and they came back home, and that's how they joined the local police service, or the local military, the national military corps, and they ended up as men of, as uniformed men in the country. So all of those kind of nuances, all of those kind of small details, you would have to capture it in your heritage journal. The other important thing, I was thinking about this, and I said, 50 years from today, I wonder, when children would see pictures with everyone in the year 2020 and 2021 like this. um, 50 years from today, they'll probably be saying, why were they wearing masks? But we need to have captured this period that we are living right now, which is a period of a pandemic. There was a pandemic some years ago, and this has been the second major global pandemic. The pandemic that took place before was mainly within the Western environment. But the questions that we would need to ask: did they live? Did they live during a period where there was a crisis, there was a pandemic, there was a war? What kind of events took place, when their parents grew up, when they grew up, and things like that. Yeah. And then um, another important element. In fact, I was thinking about it further, and I remember, um, for those who grew up in Cameroon, I remember that Cameroon was a country which was thriving. A lot of people could find their way in a lot of places. Yeah, in a lot of areas, a lot of, there was work available. People were getting scholarships for education. People were sent to all kinds of countries to study all kinds of technological and scientific skills. But then somewhere around the middle to late 80s, there was something that came, that was brought by the global multilateral financial institutions into Africa, that was called the Structural Adjustment Program. And quite frankly, for anyone who remembers well, that is where a country like Cameroon has never been the same. It's from there that everything just went completely on the tailspin. And till today that we speak, it's never been the same. It's been a life of struggle for everyone in there. It's actually now, in a place where it's a very sad situation, where there's a war and all of that. But the point I'm making is that there are events like that that need to be captured, because the impact of those events actually would tell you why people end up where they end up or how they ended up. Yeah. And that is actually transferable information for the next generation. The next important element is about information capture. Not information capture, but visual aids that you can use to as you build your. Sorry, I'm talking about visual aids. Visual aids that you can use to build your heritage journey. Yeah. It is said that pictures and illustrations will tell 1,000 words. Yeah. So try as much as possible to get as many pictures as possible. Either pictures of people living, older people in your family, in your generation. If they have pictures of their parents, try and get copies of that. At least if they don't want to part with them, you can take a picture of it and have it in your database. Illustrations, awards. If they tell you about a certain place where they live, thanks to Google, you can actually do a Google map and trace that place with Google Map. You don't need to go there physically. You can even use Google Earth. It's actually fascinating how you can pinpoint a specific location with using Google Earth. So when they tell you about a specific location, there's really no need for you to go into the location if you can't. But there are tools like Google Earth, Google Maps that you can use to access that information. You have to build a link between a link connecting each member of your traceable family. Build a link connecting each member of your traceable family. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just share my screen here, and I will show you what has become mainstream now for African Americans and a lot of people who are trying to trace their ancestry and building a heritage and building a repository of information for their, for their generations to come. Yeah. So the first one, I'm going to just share it here for you. Let's see. Let me share my screen. This. The first one is called, you can write it down. It's called ancestry.com. You go into ancestry.com. There's a whole lot of things that can be done. They can trace back to 300, 400 years. They've done this for quite a lot of, quite a lot of African Americans have used this. It's interesting that the lessons that we are seeing now from the African American community, Africans who live right now are not paying attention to them. Africans who are alive now are not paying attention to how, at some point, tracing and actually knowing where you come from will be very, very valuable for the generations of the time. So this is the one screen. You just go in and you create an account. They also have a paid service for a number of things, tracing your DNA and all of that. So this is the one page you can use, ancestry.com. Then we also have a second, we have a second page which I will share with you. It's called My African Heritage, I think. Yeah. My African Ancestry. That's it. So it's called My African Ancestry, traces your roots. It goes far back, it can, and it would use the DNA analysis and it traces exactly where you come from, linking it back up to 500 years. Yeah, linking it back up to 500 years. I had a conversation with my dad some months ago, just asking where people from my village actually come from. Yeah, and my dad could only start from the fact that people from my village come from somewhere in a place in the southwest of Cameroon called Buiding, which is going towards Mamfe and going towards Nigeria. Yeah, but it means that that is not the starting point. They would have started from somewhere and come right down to come to Buiding, and then they left Buiding and traveled north until they got to where, what is known today as Abakwapamenda. And then, another part of the group, they left some people there and part of the group carried on. Some of the people who are there, the Chomba people, the Mankon people and all of that, they stayed there. And then one part of the group carried on and they got to where we have Bambili today in Cameroon. And some of the people stayed there. And then the rest of them carried on and ended up in where we have Awin today. And then some people carried on to Bawaju, to Baligam, to Buddha. Yeah. So this, with a tool like this, you are able to trace using your DNA to build a whole family tree and capture the information that you need. Use your DNA. You can use the DNA analysis. You can use the matriarchal one, or you use the patriarchal tree, and then you build your family tree, and then you capture some, you try and trace some history. As I said, the difficulty with us as Africans is that a lot of our history is oral. So we have to. That's why the older people in our communities are history books for us. So I actually have a plan to identify the oldest people in my village and set some people to sit down with them and actually capture what they remember about our village and our ancestry and the people, our forebearers in the village. Yeah, and then the next thing is about the roots, which is exactly what I was talking about. My dad spoke to me about Buiding as the starting point from where he knows, yeah. But beyond Buiding, where did they come from to get to Buiding? Because Africans have traveled from one part of the continent and have been traveling and traveling until we are now settled where we all are, yeah. So yeah, so that is the important elements of the visual capture, which is very important for for your heritage journey. The next and important component, which I would like us to just to give you a bit of some ideas on things that you can look at on the visual side. I was talking about pictures. I spoke about certificates and awards, if there were any diaries, any journals, you capture that. Um, any old newspaper clippings that speak about people from your family or your village or your community, people that are linked to your ancestry and your history. That's also very important. Official documents like birth certificates, identity documents, if there were any at the time. Mostly, what I remember quite vaguely is that before it was the churches that registered children. So they would have a baptismal card, and that was literally what was used as an identification card. Was actually what was used to to capture the birth of children. And then, excuse me, if there are also any family recipes, it's also an important component to look at. Yeah, capture the family recipes. Also, family treatments or family traditions in the way in which food is made to keep the health and well-being of the family. One of the traditions, one of the things I remember growing up is that when my mom made some kinds of meals, she would always put cod liver oil in it. And I still remember it. I still remember that my mother used to do that, and that it was a health component that she was putting in the food. Thanks to her wisdom, some of maybe that's why some of us are still alive, because they did all of those kind of things to keep us alive, keep us healthy, and to live to the best of our ability over a long period of time. Yeah. And then if they, today we'll be talking about works of art and things like that. Were there any works of art? Were there any paintings? I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about some of the stools that we have in our home at in Cameroon. Some of the stools that I have that we have in my father's home right now. Those tools are probably um, some of them could easily be 50 years old. And I've been thinking about it and I'm saying 50 years old, it's already getting into a real a real monument. And those are not things to be ignored, for heritage sake and for the transfer of of the heritage and cultures and things of the past, to give that, with that sentimental linkage. Those are things that are also very important. So we have spent the evening today just talking about and leading up to this. Your generational wealth linked to your heritage. Or let me put it this way: your heritage is a major component of your generational wealth. The traditions, cultures, pictures, places lived, um, people encountered. Um, if you've been, your forebearers were in a war, in a pandemic, in a crisis, all those things is what makes you who you are today. Therefore, you need to be able to capture it in your in your heritage journal. You need to be able to capture it. Generations beyond us would appreciate if these cultures, these traditions are captured in a way that it can be transferred for their benefit. Generations beyond us would like to know what their link to this world is. There's nothing worse than actually floating and not knowing exactly where you come from. Because, at some point, everybody goes home. At some point, everybody goes home. There's also these people say home is where the heart is, right? That's where the emotional connection to your heritage, your history, your traditions, your forebears, who they are, what they did, where they live, what they ate, what period they lived in, which area, which country they lived in. It's absolutely important. At the end of this, you will not regret it. It would be something that you would have put together, which you will now be able to transfer from one generation to the next. You can actually hold this electronically, as I showed you on the two platforms, ancestry.com and what's the other one? Your African Ancestry. You can also even keep that data in their database and give access to the generations to come every time as you hand over or as there is a transfer from one generation to the next. So this is where we'll end it today. I thank you so much for joining us. For those who have not had the chance to connect with us, go onto our YouTube page and like the page. Go onto my YouTube page and like the page. Thank you very much for those who have already done that. For those who, you can also join our Telegram community. You just go join our Telegram community. You just go Generational Wealth Creation, and you join the conversations that we are having on the community. Yeah. And for anyone who does not know why we are doing this, it's because generational wealth does not happen by chance. It is created. It is a conscious action. It's a conscious activity that must be done intentionally. And every intentional act, every intentional collection and activities and things related to you that you put together would become valuable for the next generation. And you will be able to transfer that with a lot of love and compassion, with the knowledge that they would also be able to enhance it, to transfer to the next generation. Thank you very much, and thank you so much for joining us. Have a good evening.